Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Now, I'm sure as you've surmised from the title and the thumbnail and everything that we are still going on about alignments, but today's episode plants us a bit more firmly in the DM guide side of things rather than the player's guide, simply because, well, players really aren't going to be necessarily doing a lot to track their alignments. It's mostly going to be more of a DM storyteller sort of thing. Not that players shouldn't be paying attention to how their characters are behaving regarding their alignments and the like, but doing the exact tracking, that definitely is more of a DM activity because, well, if the player and the campaign involve more about the alignments, then really that's something that the DM is going to be instituting and is going to be should be keeping track of. Now, personally, I feel that when it comes to tracking alignments, doing more of a generalized feel for it is going to be better in the long run. Mostly because, one, it's really easy to forget to do this, especially if you are just on a roll, everybody's into the story, everyone's having fun, you're having a good time. It can be really easy to keep track of this one thing in the midst of everything else that you have to keep track of. The second reason is that it is so largely subjective depending on context, the exact alignments, the character classes, whether or not the players show remorse or joy after their particular act or activities. Any number of things can come into play here, and even then, everybody can be looking at the exact same thing and have 8 different opinions about whether or not something violated an alignment, fit within perfectly, or kind of sat somewhere in a little bit of a nebulous gray area. And it doesn't help that alignments themselves are so broad and very generalized as to provide an umbrella for so many different things, again, depending on context. But if you are going to track this, typically where you're going to be tracking it is going to be more on characters like paladins or clerics or anybody that has class abilities that revolve around their character's alignment. Or again, coming back to the cleric and paladin example, characters who have sworn themselves to some higher power, some deity. Now, when it comes to these characters, their alignments typically have to be within at least one step of their deities. For example, if your character is worshipping a lawful good deity, you need to be at least lawful neutral or neutral good. You need to have either good or lawful somewhere in your character's alignment. And typically you can't have a part of your alignment that's in direct opposition to the deity's alignment. Like, for example, lawful evil characters are not typically going to be found amongst the worshippers of a lawful good deity. If they are, it's purely out of self-serving motivations, but that will typically violate the tenets, the principles, the portfolio that the lawful good deity will typically have and uphold. So they're not going to be around very long in most circumstances, but it can still make for interesting story points. And even then, just having, 3 different possible alignment types all underneath the aegis of one deity can present some really interesting storytelling and background options just involved with this one particular faith. Because, well, hell, take a look at our own real world examples. How many different sects of Christianity are out there? The different Islamic sects that have formed, or Judaic, or any of the myriad numbers of different religions out there, the different deities, myths, and the like. There are so many different takes and interpretations there, and it would make sense even in a fantasy game, for there to be different factions, different little branches, different interpretations and views on a deity, the myths, the stories, even the outright histories of these various churches and faiths will produce different factions and different outlooks. So having these different groups vying for power or trying to determine who has the most correct interpretation can be interesting. Although, then again, it is pretty easy in these instances for some representative of this deity, some angel, to descend from on high and go, hey, look, this is the story. Everybody get your act together or you're all going to get smote. Well, I'm rambling here. Point being, alignment can be incredibly important in these contexts, and so keeping track of this can be important. Now, 5th edition kind of relaxes this a little bit, particularly where paladins are concerned, because, well, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, paladins had to be pretty strictly confined within the realms of being lawful good, and that also meant that they had certain tenets to follow. They might have varied a little bit depending on which lawful good deity they were following, but they were definitely going to be along the same lines. Since that's relaxed a bit more, you can find more varieties amongst the paladin class to fit within the mold of what the different deities will expect from their loyal champions of the faith. But they're still going to be having to follow those tenets. Even if it's a chaotic evil deity, they're going to expect the champions that are empowered by them to embody their ideals, even if those ideals are bloody mayhem and murder. So, keeping track of the alignments can be important in these instances. Another instance where it's important would be say a character has a redemption arc coming along for them. It's a neutral evil character, but they've ended up finding that one person that for some reason they just give a damn about them. Doesn't have to be a loved one. It can just be some orphan on the street that for some reason just somehow is tugging at their heartstrings a little bit, even though they thought their heart was crumpled black and dead in dust long ago. For some reason, that orphan kid, or hell, it can even be a dog. I mean, John Wick's a great example, and everybody's all on board with that. But for whatever reason, something has started to awaken certain parts of this character that were long since dead, gone, or misused, or unused. And over time, as that little change happens, that character may move along from being neutral evil to maybe lawful evil, or even just straight up moving over more towards the neutral. They may even go towards chaotic neutral as they move away from being entirely self-serving to, I'm not really feeling the whole good side of things, but I definitely like taking care of this character, and I definitely still want to take care of myself and serve my own interests, but I'm not feeling so great about the harming everybody aspect sort of things. That kind of storytelling can be incredible, watching a character develop, grow, and change, not just in terms of stats, abilities, but in their outlook, their moral fiber, their ineffable something or other, je ne sais quoi, that little thing that just changes about them over time, over the course of gameplay, can be incredibly compelling and really goddamn entertaining, if we're being honest. But to keep track of it, I would say in either of these instances, what you would want to do is just take your basic alignment chart, where you have the law versus chaos axis, and then the good versus evil axis. You want that little 9-space alignment chart there, and mark off where the character is sitting at. And just kind of, even if you're only doing it generally, if you're just picking at little things here and there, mark down, like for the session or over a couple of sessions, where they're sitting. Are they being more lawful and good? Well, then put a couple of check marks on the lawful and good side of things, so that way you know that they're staying overall in the lawful good category. Are they moving over more towards maybe being a bit more neutral good. You know, they're not being so focused on the law as they are with doing good. They are taking more underhanded methods in bringing about good. Well, maybe they're moving a bit more towards neutral. Maybe they get a couple of points in chaos even. But a couple of points in chaos, while still maintaining and earning a couple over in law, just kind of shifts them more into the neutral thing just by a law of averages. And you can apply the same methodology for, are they being good? Are they doing evil? Well, if they're doing a little bit of both by law of averages, that just puts them more on the neutral scale of things. But again, it just depends on what the character's behavior is. And just as important, I would argue, does the character feel any remorse? Did they do something evil because they saw no way out? They were stuck between a rock and a hard place? Do they show remorse afterwards? Do they regret their actions? Does the character have does the player have the character embody that? Do they act that out? Do they describe it? If they do those things, well then, hey, showing remorse, showing regret, that's certainly not an evil or self-serving thing to do. That's definitely more on the good side of things. So definitely give them points for having that remorse. But on the flip side of that coin, if they show absolutely no remorse, if they are just giddy with delight and utter contempt for whoever they inflicted that evil on, well, you know what? That's definitely worth a couple of points in the evil category. If they're not really showing a lot of remorse, but they're not really showing a lot of regret about, or a lot of delight in what they did, they just viewed it as something necessary to get things done, that's probably a little bit more on the neutral side of things. So put a point down in the neutral category. But again, I hope this emphasizes to you why I say this is so broad and so subjective that doing more of a general feel rather than tracking alignment specifically may be better in the long run. Unless it is utterly important and specific to a character's particular arc or relevant to characters' class abilities and their standing with, say, a particular faction, especially in the case of paladins or clerics who are following the edicts of a deity that they have sworn themselves to, that they have dedicated themselves to. Those instances, it may be worthwhile to do so, but I still am personally of the opinion that doing it is more a general thing on a case-by-case, even session-by-session basis may be more beneficial in the long run. Because, take a look at just how broad the particular umbrellas of each individual alignment is. It's so vague, necessarily so, but still very much so vague. And there's a lot of room and a lot of gray area for a number of different things, outlooks, and perspectives. But with that said, let me know what you think down below. Do you have your own methods for keeping track of a character's alignment progression? Or did you like what I've presented here today? Or did you just outright hate it? Please let me know down in the comments below. And with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. You guys have yourselves a good night.